Looking for your next unforgettable adventure? Want a front row seat to nature's most radioactive wonder? Then climb aboard Kaiju Cruises, the original Godzilla sightseeing tour. That's right, folks. Just off the coast of Japan's most structurally reinforced harbor, you could witness the king of the monsters himself, rising in all his glory. He's tall, he glows when he's mad, and he's probably hungry. Hopefully not for you. Each tour includes complimentary binoculars, a poncho for sea spray, and a flotation device just in case you get thrown off the ship. Disclaimer: Godzilla sightings are not guaranteed. Tour may be rerouted, canceled, or abruptly ended due to Godzilla related attacks. Kaiju Cruises is not responsible for melted cameras, emotional trauma, or unexpected mutation. Do not taunt Godzilla. Do not attempt to pet Godzilla. If Godzilla makes eye contact, lower your head and remain still. And in case you are shipwrecked, an emergency complimentary snack will be provided. Kaiju cruises, like whale watching, if the whale could step on you or set you on fire. Welcome to Movie Postmortem, where we dissect films of all kinds, whether they're good, bad, or those guilty pleasures we just can't quit. I'm Reggie Hill, and I'm joined by my nephew Isaiah Brown. Together, we're here to examine what worked, what didn't, and why we keep coming back for more. So grab your popcorn because no movie is safe from the scalpel on Movie Postmortem. So, hello, everybody. On today's episode of Movie Postmortem, we're going to talk about Godzilla, the 1998 American film that was directed by Roland Emmerich of Moonfall fame and starred Matthew Broderick.
Roland Emmerich is the tycoon of terrible action movies.
Yeah, he's the go-to disaster, king, I would say. The Day After Tomorrow, Moonfall, those types of stories we talked about 2012. And, this was one of his films that, did actually well at the box office. It
For
grossed
some
over,
reason.
yeah, it grossed over 300 and like $70 million worldwide, but was actually seen as a critical failure. And that was the reason that I wanted to revisit this film. This was my choice this week. So if you hate this
Yeah.
one, that's on me.
We've been having sessions where I've been choosing nonstop. So this is the first of your picks. Thank you very much for making me relive this pile of garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I hadn't watched this since 1998, and so it was very interesting to revisit this film. And while I was watching it, I was like, "Man, this is a good film to do for this podcast because it's been over 25 years." So, what do I think about it now? How does it hold up? I don't want to go into, a nerdy fan moments again, like I've gone on previous podcasts, but Godzilla is probably one of my top two favorite, things of all time. And
Yeah,
so I love Godzilla. So how would I react to watching this again? That's the reason I picked this film.
yeah, absolutely. We're cut from the same cloth, us two, literally in the same family. For me, I'm pretty much the exact same. Where my top twos are mostly like Godzilla related and Transformers related. So I do have a sort of bias when it comes to things like this. This movie actually brought up a whole lot of memories for me because while I was sitting there about to cut it on, I was like, man, I know for a fact I watched this, but I cannot remember anything about this. When did I even watch this? And then it came back to me. I think I watched this all the way back when I might have been like 12. I think this is one of the movies that I watched with my mother and do not remember anything about it for very good reason.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about revisiting films where if they're not memorable at all, that's what you said. Like, yeah, maybe I remember watching it, but I don't remember a lot about it. There are complete scenes and characters that I completely had forgotten about in this film. And I remember when it came out, I remember the advertising for this film probably more than the actual movie itself because it was such a big deal. And so that's where I thought it would be fun for both of us, as Godzilla fans to revisit the film that most people consider the worst, Godzilla film made. So we're like, yeah, we could do the ones everybody likes, but let's just actually go back to the worst because we've been
Yeah,
talking about Roland Emmerich, so I thought it would be fun.
yeah. And what we have here is terrible.
And so, what would you rank it out of 5 stars to go along with that categorization?
I mean, good lord, this movie was a terrible zero. This was like a point 0.5 out of 5 stars.
Okay, so that's one of the lowest rankings that you've given. I can't remember the other film you gave that low of a ranking to.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, well, I think the other record I had was Moonfall, which is both like a 0 out of 5 and a 5 at the same time.
yeah. Yeah, also by Roland Emmerich again.
Yeah,
Uh,
he
it's
really has a good reputation for making bad movies, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that was what he did. That was his bread and butter for a long time, and he was kind of the best at it. His movies were big blockbusters in a way that had kind of fallen out of fashion at the studios, but he would always make a lot of money. You would know that, you were going to see something blow up, something, world threatening. It was going to be amazing. And that's why, honestly, I think this fails as one of his disaster films. And we'll get into the reasons why.
Yeah,
Um, but at the same time, I actually found myself being less harsh on this than I remember being in the past. This might shock you, but I'm going to give this movie a 2 out of 5 stars. I think it's a bad film. I won't call it terrible, but I will give it a 2 out of 5 stars. So we have a point 0.5 out of 5 and a 2 out of 5. So we're really bouncing between terrible and just bad. So
yeah. Maybe my opinion will change by the time we get to the ending.
yeah, maybe mine will as well, because I think when I look at my actual list of what I consider cause of celebration and death, it's actually skewed pretty heavily in one direction. So maybe my score is actually not justified. And so this is a Godzilla film, so we don't have to delve too deep into the plot, but I will give.
Scratch that. Let's just stop this right there and there. This
I'll,
is not a Godzilla movie. This is Zilla. Number one. Number one. This is not Godzilla. Keep his name out your mouth when talking about this movie.
So I'll give the plot for this film. French nuclear tests irradiate an iguana into a giant monster that heads off to New York City. The American military must chase the monster across the city to stop it before it reproduces. That is the basic plot of this film. The thing that you brought up that I think we have to address right off the top, we're not going to do a plot rundown for this. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
worth
not
it.
worth it.
It's not worth it to do. And because I think so much of the behind the scenes stuff is so much more interesting to talk about and actually so much more instrumental than what we actually see on the screen that we'll probably spend a lot more time talking about that than we usually do.
It's
Uh,
funny. I actually don't know anything about the behind the scenes here. The only thing, it got to the point where halfway through the movie, I was Googling, just like, man, when this movie was made and what its budget was. And it's funny, because, like, while I was watching this, I did not know CGI in this time could look this bad. Because I literally looked up, because, like, man, Jurassic Park came out a few years before this.
yes.
What? And it had 65 million, and Zilla had 120 million. What happened?
Yes. And so the thing that's really interesting that you said is when this film came out and why it came out. So Toho, the Japanese company, had been really pitching for a long time to make a new Godzilla film for Hollywood. This kind of bounced around for a long time with lots of people kind of starting various projects and then stopping projects. And it wasn't until, around 96 or 97 that, Roland Emmerich and his crew, producers, they really got on board and said, oh, okay, we can do this. He'd been doing, some very successful things, and they decided to tell a version of Godzilla that resulted in the film that we see right now. The thing that you have to accept right from the start is that this film was made by people who did not like Godzilla at all. Not only did not like Godzilla, did not love Godzilla. They really did not want to do anything, to do with Godzilla. They wanted to make something that was completely their own. And
Yeah,
it
well, that
shows
was
in every way, shape, or form with this film.
yeah, that was the biggest mistake of Toho, entrusting Godzilla to Roland Emmerich of all people. And this movie was so bad, we almost didn't get another Godzilla for a long time. In fact, like, there's a big gap between Zilla and Godzilla 2014. That's how much this movie
Yeah.
screwed up.
Yeah, again, despite making, a profit, it killed the franchise and American Godzilla franchise for 16 years. And in many ways, it made Toho think, you know what, we need to go back to what we were doing. There was some great Godzilla films that came out, Japan during that time, but it wasn't until 2014 that they even attempted to revisit the idea by somebody who actually likes Godzilla. And
Yeah,
so
somebody that gave a crap.
And so the biggest kind of critique that people kind of have about this film is that, kind of what Isaiah already mentioned, it's Godzilla name only. Uh, there have been many kind of parodies, meta references, even in Japan, to whatever you want to call this, creature, if it's just Zilla or just something completely, but it's not Godzilla for so many reasons. And I would say, rather than do what we normally do and talk about kind of the causes of celebration first, I think we have to start off with the absolute biggest cause of death for this film, which is that this is a Godzilla film without Godzilla. This
Well,
is
it's
the
funny.
only Godzilla film that was ever made without Godzilla.
It's funny because like for the longest time, before I rewatched this movie for good reasons, I just thought to myself like, man, I don't remember much about this movie, but for what I remember, this was just a bad Godzilla movie and just an okay movie too. Now that I rewatched it today, my opinion of that has changed. This is both a bad Godzilla movie and a bad movie. It fails
Yes.
pretty much with both, and it really speaks volumes with this how bad this Godzilla was. To where, funny enough, if you look this up, you can actually find footage of the actual Godzilla killing Zilla in a movie.
Yes.
Just Toho absolutely hates what we did with this for good reason. This was terrible.
Yeah, and it kind of breaks one of those fundamental rules that we've talked about before on the podcast. If you have a popular intellectual property that you pay for, the right to remake, why would you then try to change everything about it?
Honestly, like what?
You don't make anyone happy. So as you just, very succinctly and well said, this is not only a bad Godzilla movie, it's a bad movie. It's a bad disaster movie, it's a bad action movie because it failed to do both of those things because they tried to change so much about what Godzilla actually is that they have this kind of watered down neutered disaster film that doesn't have the big set pieces and disaster that you would go to see in a Roland Emmerich film. So it's like you got the worst of both worlds because you didn't actually want to make a Godzilla movie. What I see when I watch this film is like Jurassic Park 3. You basically have a really big T Rex and velociraptors. That's what he
Yeah,
decided to do. There is no Godzilla in this film.
yeah. So just real quick before you go into watching Zilla, take whatever you know about Godzilla and completely throw it out the window. What we have here is a giant mutated iguana. That's literally what he is in this movie.
There were so many more iconic things about Godzilla, including his fire, radioactive breath, the fact that he destroys cities, fights other monsters, everything else that they just did not do. It was just like, okay, we got a giant iguana, let's go from there. And so just a little bit kind of going back down memory lane. I remember the advertising for this film when it was just like size matters, showing like Godzilla's foot crushing a T-Rex skeleton in a New York museum just to let you know like, how big he was and what it was going to look like in the early trailers. They were doing a good job teasing what the final design was going to look like because they didn't want you to know. And I remember when I saw like in a magazine, we used to read movie magazines back then, they had a picture of Godzilla standing next to like a skyscraper. And I was like, what in the heck is this? He had this long, jaw, this underbite, and he had that what he looks like a giant iguana. And I
Yeah,
just thought,
that's
wait,
literally what it was in the movie too. So like what?
I was like, wait, what is this? I was like, this can't be right. I I
Like is
thought
this
it
the
was some
final
kind of
is this the final copy? Like what is this?
I thought it was some kind of joke. So I was like, okay, he doesn't look like Godzilla. And so again, remember at this point in time, Godzilla franchise has existed for, 40 years. No one had drastically changed Godzilla, although his look had changed in subtle ways, based on, the filmmakers who were making him at the time. This was a radical departure from what Godzilla actually looked like. He was an iguana. He didn't have this big hulking, giant body. He was very fast in the movie. He's running around a lot. And more
And
importantly,
he was pregnant.
yeah. Well, to me, that's not even the most offensive thing. I can get
It's not offensive, but it just speaks to how much they did not care.
to me, the biggest thing that shows how much they didn't care. He doesn't breathe fire.
Yeah, that's I.
If you did say, like, okay, what does Godzilla do? He's a giant fiber breathing dinosaur that destroys cities. Okay, so which of those things he's gonna do in this movie? None of those.
Most of the damage done in this entire city of New York was done by the military.
Yes, that's something they even point out for laughs in the film. But to me, it's something that's not just a throwaway kind of gag line. It really defeats the purpose of Godzilla himself. Um, if you're a Godzilla fan, even if you've casually watched some of the other films, beyond the monster destruction, there's a very serious theme in all of them about Godzilla being kind of an inevitable force of nature that mankind's actions has resulted in, this thing happening to us. He's destructive. Again, it's like trying to stop a thunderstorm or a
Yeah,
tornado.
and to go back a few years, Godzilla is literally an allegory for the nuclear bombs that dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes. In this film, there's no deeper message there at all. It's just simply, oh, this was something that happened, and now he's taking, refuge in New York City. And he's not really destroying the city. Things are getting damaged as he runs around, but it's not even the kind of theme for Godzilla. And so it doesn't have any message. And more importantly, if you take out the whole radioactive fire breathing, he doesn't really have the destructive ability. It's like trying to catch a dog, and the dog is kind of knocking stuff over as it runs
Yeah,
around.
it's funny because Godzilla's intelligence has always been like in debate over the past few years, how smart or dumb he actually is. But here, he is literally just an animal.
Yes. And I think that was a massive mistake. Godzilla is not just an animal. Reducing Godzilla to just an animal that's running around that you can bait by putting out a pile of fish really shows that you don't understand the deeper meaning. I wouldn't even say it was that deep. That was a pretty on the surface level meaning of the original Godzilla film and everyone that came after that. So
It's like it's deep enough to where you could kick over like a rock and find it. It's
yeah,
like
exactly.
so easy.
And so they eliminate that completely. And so what you have here is this big iguana that's more like a T-Rex that's running through the city. There's kind of no deeper meaning for, the destruction and things that kind of happen in this story. And because of this, a lot of the movie doesn't make sense. And it's like Roland Emmerich looked at Godzilla, one Godzilla film, recognized some things that they were doing, and then just said, okay, yeah, I guess we can do that scene kind of the same way. But he didn't have a reason to do it. So, one example that kind of made me laugh out loud when I saw it, when the film opens, you see Godzilla, attacking, a ship at sea, various other places. You don't see him doing it. You kind of just see, fins, his spikes, his claws. And it's kind of a like homage to the earlier films where you don't see Godzilla before a big reveal. And they're copying what happened in the original films in Japan, where you see survivors and people are, waving Geiger counters over them when they're radioactive. Why are these people radioactive? It's never actually explained why. In the original
Nope.
film, it makes sense because Godzilla himself is like a giant nuclear reactor because he has nuclear, fire breath. Here, it's like, oh yeah, remember when they did that? Yeah, so for some reason these guys are gonna be radioactive too. But again, Godzilla is just a lizard here. So why is he actually radioactive, or why are people encountering him radioactive? Which is a thing that doesn't actually happen if you're just exposed to radioactivity anyway. So it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's even stupider because they technically his name is technically even wrong in this movie. Because fun fact, the only reason why we even got a name of Godzilla in this movie is because there's that Asian guy that the one survivor of
Yes.
that ship was like saying Godzilla. He's like this. There's like this ancient folklore, or whatever. And the reporter says Godzilla. I literally
Yeah.
saw it with the subtitles.
Yeah, I saw that in the subtitles. They misnamed him twice.
Everything in this movie is wrong.
One of the stars I give the film is in the beginning when you don't see Godzilla revealed, where you're just seeing giant footprints, when you're seeing, these ships being pulled underwater, these fishing trawlers where their nets are caught on something massive, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
no, it's suggesting the size of Godzilla. Those scenes were well done. I like
That was
those
like the
scenes.
that was like the only good scene in this movie.
Yes, I was like the early scenes work really well building that suspense. You really want to see Godzilla. Like, oh, what does this thing look like? You get the sense it's huge, it's destructive. The movie just kind of falls apart once he, actually emerges onto land. Before that, it's actually really well done. They have this sense of kind of building tension and suspense and almost terror in some cases. And so, right up until he kind of comes on land, I thought they were actually doing a good job.
Yeah, and then it goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
And not just downhill, it's kind of like a nosedive from there. And so this is a criticism, this is a cause of death that is going to be like completely subjective to me. And I didn't want to say this at first because I feel like kind of, man, maybe I shouldn't say this, but now that we're here now, I'm feeling bolder. I'm feeling braver to say this.
Do it.
This movie, for the most part, is boring.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things I wrote down. I'm a huge Godzilla fan. I am not going to pretend that every Godzilla movie is exciting from beginning to end. Most of them have huge pieces of the film where it just drags because Godzilla's not on screen. Then you got different
And
levels of stuff
yeah,
happening.
and it's weird. Even when Godzilla's there, the action is still boring.
That's the problem. Even when he's in the city, it's still so weak. Which is essentially, like I said, you just see this giant iguana running away from helicopters or just kind of running through the city while people are trying to shoot at him, but he's not actually destroying anything. He doesn't have his fire breath, So it's like, oh, well, this is like the least amount of destruction that I think I've ever seen in a Roland Emmerich film. So
Yeah,
it's like it's
it's like
boring because the highs aren't even very high. So the low points is not that different.
yeah, and it's weird because like he has his trademark fire breath, Godzilla fire breath here because he just happens to roar, and his roar pushes cars, and the cars just simultaneously just explode, and that's the fire. It's so stupid.
I think the scene where Godzilla comes ashore was another scene that was really well done. Also because you don't see the full Godzilla model in
Yeah,
this.
once you see everything, you're just like, oh no. And it's funny because I think you were able to have enjoyment in that moment, but I wasn't because once he started to come ashore, I remembered what he looked like, so I wasn't able to have that like all moment.
I was trying to forget it. So like you see this massive wave approaching like this fisherman who is trying to catch some fish during a rainstorm, and you see like his spikes come up. The first part of this scene, you only see like his legs or his spikes or his tail, like if it's passing the building. So you see everything we talked before about in War of the Worlds, like that ground level perspective. So you see it from the perspective of the people. Like you would be like, what is this? You just see legs, and more importantly, you see boats just crash into the highway. I like that kind of detail that like if this creature emerged from the water, it'd probably have a lot of debris on his back. So it's actually just falling, off of his back the whole time he's just walking through the city initially. And that was some really good destruction and carnage. And I really like that. The other scene that works really well is the fact that when he's walking towards people, you see the ground just thumping and everybody's like getting like just jolted into the air. Car alarms are going off because like that's how big he is. That's how huge he is, before you see him. That doesn't make any sense later when you see him and you see that he walks kind of nimbly, like he's always walking on his tippy
Yeah,
toes.
he has such a light step in this movie
Yeah.
to where even in the movie they keep losing him somehow.
Yeah. So I was like, oh wow, that was really well done. It just doesn't fit the actual model that they have. And so this is where it was really like the beginning of the end for me for the film because it marked a big change. As we said before, this is not a Godzilla film. So what you see is that Godzilla is kind of walking nimbly through the film, or he's walking nimbly through the city. He's not destroying anything intentionally, and then he just hides. That's not what Godzilla does. And again, more importantly, if you're telling a story that's a metaphor for a unstoppable destructive force of nature, you know what the force of nature doesn't do? It doesn't just hide.
Yeah, and if you want to tell a story about even if you want to just do the basic crap of just like giant lizard destroyed New York, barely does it.
Yes, he does it. And one of the things that was a really interesting kind of call out, because again, this
It's fun.
happened.
No, it's funny because I'm getting more upset now that I'm thinking about this. Because even when he's like, they're like, oh, he's pregnant. He came here to lay his eggs. He's nesting, and his nesting location doesn't even look that destroyed either.
Yeah, it's so inconsistent about how much damage he's actually doing, and the whole idea that he's burrowing undergrounds and in buildings and aren't falling over, that didn't make any sense to me.
Nor
Uh,
do we see it either.
yeah, and so it's really poorly handled. And that's just kind of part of the complete lack of understanding about what Godzilla is, or more importantly, what something like this would be like. The best analogy I kept coming back to was like, yeah, it's just like he's a dog hiding from people who are trying to catch him. And at one point, Dr. Totopoulos says, like, he's not an enemy for the military that's trying to catch him. Like, it's just an animal. So, like, don't assume he's trying to outsmart him. We can just easily trap him. They put out a big pile of fish, and that gets, Godzilla
Yeah.
to come to
And then
them.
you get the 10 out of 10 line. That's a lot of fish. Man, not only this movie just is weak all around. Just weak CGI, weak plot, and weak writing, weak characters, weak everything.
Just the idea that in this film, a giant monster has moved into Manhattan. Everybody saw it. It was on the news. People evacuate because they've lost the giant creature, which again, I'm not saying that that's not unusual for Godzilla films. Godzilla vanishes usually by going back into the water, but here they lose him in the city. And then this is where the actual human element, as you mentioned, gets really bad. So I have to introduce, two characters in the film, which were clearly the director's attempt to make fun of any criticism that he would get in the film. So the mayor of New York in this movie is named Mayor Ebert. Yes, he's named after the famous, film critic Roger Ebert. He has an assistant who he just calls Gene, who you understand is supposed to be Gene Siskel. So in this movie are two characters based on the critic Siskel and Ebert. So the mayor, for some reason, in this film, he keeps saying he doesn't want to evacuate the city because he's worried about, his reelection chances. People are going to get really upset if they evacuated the city for nothing. There's a giant dinosaur loose in the city. So this whole idea that, wow, he's really concerned about this and he has to meet with the business owners who are like, man, why are you trying to close down the city? It's such lazy, cliched writing that it's just like this is not believable for a second. The thing that's not, believable is the fact that people would actually be concerned about this type of business, re-election stuff when there's a giant monster. The giant monster is more believable than that.
It's funny because I could tell that what they were trying to go for is like the whole like, oh, New Yorkers have that attitude, New Yorkers are different or whatever. But even that failed.
Yeah, like, it doesn't make any sense. It's not believable. So again, like this is not a secret thing. This is not like what they're trying to ape with Jaws, where it's like, oh well, those bureaucrats, they want to keep things open. It's going to endanger people. It's like, no, there is a giant monster loose. Nobody would be debating this. There would be no question about is this the right call.
The only movie that's gotten me this upset is Borderlands because that movie felt like an insult. This movie also feels like an insult.
In the film, as you've already mentioned multiple times, they find out that Godzilla is pregnant. And so this is where science gets really bad and just writing gets really bad to me.
You can't suspend your disbelief enough and still be conscious for this.
Yeah.
Because even the most basic biology fails with this.
Again, it's not even biology to me. It's basic movie writing. So I'll break down kind of what my issue was here. So when, Dr. Totopoulos realizes that the, creature is pregnant, he makes a huge leap, multiple leaps that I don't understand. He says, "Oh, well,
Yeah.
he's pregnant." And so my first reaction as a scientist again would have been, "Oh, the creature is female." So I have no understanding, no reason to know why that they assume that the creature is somehow a pregnant male, because then they make the leap that, oh, well, if it's pregnant, that can't be that there's another one around. It has to be the only one of its kind. They have no reason to assume that this is the only Godzilla around. So it makes no sense for them to all of a sudden decide that this must be a male who's reproducing asexually. It just doesn't make any sense from a screenwriting perspective that this is the conclusion that they reached here.
Honestly, they don't even bother like explaining it either. Because like because here's the thing that really like speaks of why I hate it so much. Because like here's what happens. So the dude, while everything's going down, he just walks into a store. He's like, "Hi, do you have a pregnancy test?" And I'm just like, why? Like, what led you to think that it could be pregnant? Number one. Number two, are you explaining how you thought this? No, he didn't.
Yeah, that's where, again, in terms of what he needs to be doing, what his actual job is, there's a lot that happens later in the film that they just kind of use Dr. Totopoulos as, okay, he's a scientist, so he would be doing this and doing that. And this is another thing. I like how we're going completely out of structure for this film, which I think is actually
Yep,
fun. You know,
it's fine because I hate this movie so much.
the entire military, they set up a base in New Jersey to kind of keep track of, Godzilla, and they have their, forward command base. And he has microscopes, lab, computer stuff set up there. And he's actually doing research in a tent this whole time. Part of me thought, why is he actually doing research here? Why wouldn't he be somewhere like where they actually had a lab? There's lots of universities there that he could actually be at,
Yeah,
including kind of a
they're
big one
in
like Princeton.
like they're in New York.
So I was like, why he wouldn't be doing his work in a field? This is where a secondary kind of supporting character played by Jean Reno, the French actor, he comes in. Really like
oh
this actor. He plays a guy, Philippe Roche, who was part of the French Secret Service. For
yeah,
some reason, this is all France's fault, and he's here to help slash cover it up.
the French stereotypes are just all over the place
Oh
here.
yeah, that
They
was
have
really.
the most aggressive French names ever. Their accents are just moi 10 out of 10. And there's even a scene where like they're trying to sneak by, and the dude puts on his go-to like, "Oh yeah, we chew gum because it makes us look more American." Ho ho ho.
Yeah,
And
I
even
actually
does like
did.
a fake American accent.
That did get a laugh out of me because I was like, that was one of the few things that was actually stupid and but funny. But I was like, oh yeah, I forgot he was even in this film. And so like this whole subplot with the French, Secret Service agents, it doesn't make any sense. And it could have been completely eliminated because what you have at this point, when Dr. Totopoulos has been fired, then the French Secret Service, they say, oh, we're going to help you. We want to actually help you find the nest. We believe you that Godzilla has laid eggs. The military, for some reason, just says, okay, this is not actually happening. We refuse to accept that this is happening. So Dr. Totopoulos and French Secret Service have to go out on their own to, do it themselves.
It's so bad.
Yeah, at the 90-minute mark, and I checked, 90 minutes into the film, Godzilla is seemingly killed because the military chases him out of the tunnels that he's hiding in, and he jumps into the water. But they are waiting for him, and the military take him out with some torpedoes. I was like, okay, that's 90 minutes. So for like the next half hour, the film switches into Velociraptor mode where you see Dr. Topoulos, the French Secret Service, his ex-girlfriend, they
Yeah,
all find the eggs at the Madison Square Garden, and then they just get chased around by velociraptors for about
literally the
30 minutes. Yeah.
literally the and also fun fact. Now that we're on this, just to counteract all this negativity we have going on here, just a quick little fun fact trivia for Jurassic Park, an actual good movie. So, fun fact: the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park, they aren't actually Velociraptors; they're Utahraptors.
Yeah.
Yeah, actual Velociraptors were way too small, but by the time they were filming, they discovered the Utahraptor. So, boom, there we go. Based off of that,
We need that. Yeah.
yeah. But back to this, yeah, literally 1-to-1, almost the Velociraptor scene from Jurassic Park, but done infinitely worse because
Yeah.
I counted 16 different moments where our main people could have died and very much should have, and they just didn't because the story wasn't over.
Yeah, there's so much plot armor as they're sneaking around trying to evade about 200, Godzilla raptors in Madison Square Garden. It's just weak writing. It looks terrible. The CGI effects are the worst for the indoor Godzilla scenes, because that's another big thing to kind of point out. This movie essentially takes place in the giant monsoon hitting New York. If you know anything about special effects, one of the earliest cheats to do with special effects, like, oh, just do it in a rainy night scene. That way you can kind of hide the way that the
Yeah,
blending or the CGI doesn't really
yeah.
fit. They did
Yeah,
it in.
Monster vs. Godzilla. You know you're guilty of that.
Oh yeah, every film does it. Like I love Jurassic Park, but there are key scenes in Jurassic Park where they do the same thing. It's like, okay, this is how we cheat. So this way in Godzilla, it's like raining and it's nighting most of the time. Without the rain indoors for the Godzilla Raptor scenes, the CGI just looks really bad and obvious. It's again, that's when Jurassic Park they were clever enough to say, okay, sometimes we're gonna have some practical effects and some practical, Velociraptors. It just always looks pasted in and not there in this end part of the film. And like you said, it's just redundant. And so what you had is okay, great. We had the T Rex chases with Godzilla. Now we're gonna have Velociraptor scenes. We can get some indoor action. It's just so derivative of Jurassic Park. So this is kind of like Jurassic Park 3. That's kind of what they've turned Godzilla into at this point.
I'm sorry. It's just I have to keep venting here. It's just like
Go ahead.
Godzilla movies are like the king of cheese when it comes to things like that. Like Godzilla's gravity-defying dropkick, or his happy dance, or him just son of Godzilla. Like Godzilla movies are known for being cheesy and somewhat stupid. Do you know how hard you have to try to piss off Toho, the king of cheese?
What you said earlier that I really like. This isn't just a bad Godzilla film, it's a bad film. So I thought, like, okay, if we took Godzilla's name off of this, just made this just a kaiju film, would it be
It's
better?
still bad.
It's still bad. Yeah, so it's very unfulfilling. There's not enough action, it's not enough
Yeah,
destruction.
the
Again, like
characters are terrible. The B plot goes nowhere pretty much. At the end of the movie, they just kiss after making up from almost dying somehow, I guess.
in the end, as we said, like they're getting chased by Godzilla in a taxi, and I was like, oh, yep, this is a Roland Emmerich film because all the main character got to do is just drive really fast, man. Put the pedal to the metal, and you can
Yeah,
outrun anything, including
yeah.
Godzilla.
Again, I counted 16 different moments where they could have died very easily from the halfway from the movie to the end. There's no way you can convince me that this Zilla, who is like a stealth master and quick as all living get out, is having trouble catching this one taxi car that's driving like at 30 miles per hour.
Okay, this might be like the final thing we can talk about here. This is
Yeah,
something that we've addressed in the past where we don't like it where the adversary is so overpowered that the military can't do anything. In this film, the military is easily capable of handling Godzilla. At the end, they only need a few, airplane
yeah.
missiles and
Well,
they find.
if there's an overpowered character to where they can't be harmed, it should be Godzilla. That's just my opinion.
Yes, I agree 100%. And that's why I felt even seeing that and thinking usually I'd be like, yeah, I actually like that. And here it's the opposite of what he should be. Like I keep saying, Godzilla is a force of nature.
Okay, I'm beyond angry at this point, so I'm just kind of exhausted. This movie beat like the aggression out of me. This is one of the few movies where I think we're going to cover in our history to where I have literally nothing good to say about it. After pretty much venting for the past hour, I'm going to change my score. Actually, I'm actually gonna lower it. This is a 0 out of 5 stars. I genuinely think you are wasting your time if you watch this, and you're wasting your money if you buy it.
I think after our discussion, I'm going to probably honestly lower my score as well. Um, when I kind of thought about the film, I thought I had more positives that I could really, honestly justify with this film. So I'm going to take mine down to a 1 star out of 5 because I think outside of those initial scenes where Godzilla's kind of kept in suspense, that I can't really say that this is a good even kaiju film, and the poor effects themselves don't even make it a good Jurassic Park knockoff.
Yeah, it's just like that moment where you're just like, okay, here's my costume celebration. I wrote them down. Oh, where are they? What page is it?
Yeah. I would say in terms of post-mortem, I think that's fair. It had some pretty big causes of death that we, kind of got into, and there's sometimes no celebration that you could have that could overcome a massive cause of death.
And since this is our theme, if this movie was on the autopsy table, my genuine advice as a doctor or a coroner would be cremate this movie, then spread the ashes in the dumpster because nothing of this needs to be remembered.
And so that's it for this episode of Movie Postmortem. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us 5 stars because even bad podcasts deserve a good review. Remember, whether it's good, bad, or just a guilty pleasure, every movie deserves a postmortem. Thanks for listening.
And as always, we'll see you next time.